He decided that the only truly fair way to figure out the single greatest album of all time, at least from his huge library, was to subject them all to this really rigorous World Cup-style tournament.
I love that. It's football meets musicology.
But it is a full-on bracket.
Yeah, the intensity of knockout rounds, the brutal finality of the group stage.
Yeah.
It brings this, I don't know, competitive edge to what's usually a pretty quiet, subjective hobby.
Right. And today we're in the early stages, round 1, specifically Group 218. And it's a group with 4 records that are so fundamentally different. The result is actually pretty revealing.
So our mission today is to get inside Greens to Rox's criteria for this round. We need to unpack how he weighed everything, nostalgia, technical hardware.
And that big debate over compilation albums.
Right. All of that to figure out exactly how these 4 stacked up. Because for 3 of these records, this is it. The journey ends right here. Only the top 2 go through. Okay,
so let's get into this lineup. Because it's a bit of a time capsule. It spans 4 decades, multiple genres.
It really does. It kicks off with some huge stadium rock, then jumps to pure 90s pop, makes a stop for some beautiful lyrical folk, and then finishes up with, modern hard rock.
The 4 albums battling it out in Group 218 are, first, we have Concrete and Gold by the Foo Fighters. That's from 2017.
The newest one.
Yeah, by a long shot. Second, the self-titled debut, Suzanne Vega from 1985.
The classic.
Then, Don't Bore Us, Get to the Chorus. That's the 1995 Greatest Hits collection from Roxette.
And that's the one we really have to get into.
Oh, yeah. And finally, the groundbreaking, iconic Boston vinyl by Boston from way back in 1976.
So for you, listening to this, the big question is why a greatest hits album? A format that, let's be honest, is often hated by serious fans. Why did it not just win this group, but kind of demolish the competition?
That's the core of it. We're going to look at how that sheer density of hits can sometimes trump artistry and modern production. So let's start at the top. The champion of the group.
Coming in at number 1 and taking that first slot for round 2 is Don't Bore Us, Get to the Chorus by Roxette.
Yeah.
And wow, before we even get to the music, the notes here are intensely personal. The context is everything.
It absolutely is. The author's whole analysis of this album, it starts with a really deep reflection on the passing of Marie Fredriksson.
Yeah, back in 2019, she was 61 after a really long battle with a brain tumor. And you can feel how that news it fundamentally shapes the listening experience for this whole quest.
It creates an immediate emotional bias, and you have to acknowledge that's a powerful, maybe an irresistible factor in any kind of personal best of list.
Oh, for sure. When an artist who is so important to you in your youth passes away, it's incredibly sad. It's a stark reminder, like Greens to Rox says, of your own mortality, but also it brings their legacy into such sharp focus.
Precisely. For a dedicated fan who, by their own admission, never got to see Roxette live, the physical recordings, the albums, they become exponentially more precious.
They're all that's left.
Right. They are now the only medium left to experience Marie's incredible, powerful, just, distinctive voice, delivering these massive, fabulous songs. And that emotional anchor, that alone gives this album a gravity, a sort of untouchable quality that, purely objective criticism might just miss.
It's a moment of reflection, and then right after that, he pivots to the album title itself, Don't Bore Us, Get to the Chorus.
Which is a little bit cheesy.
It's a bit cheesy, yeah. But it's a fun bit of wordplay, and it's completely accurate for their first proper greatest hits record. And this title, it perfectly sets up the controversy that Greens to Rox himself identifies with.
Yeah. And this is where we really get into the philosophy of the album quest. See, Greens to Rox has this strong, pre-existing skepticism, a long, detailed rant, you could call it, about the whole category of greatest hits albums.
And that deep-seated prejudice makes Roxette's win here even more fascinating.
It does.
So why the hate for compilations in general? What are the usual complaints that make fans roll their eyes?
Well, the standard critique, it's multifaceted, and purists hold it very deeply. The first, and maybe the biggest problem, is that they're seen as pure cash-ins.
Right.
They're often rushed out by the record company, designed purely to make a profit, often with very little genuine input from the artists themselves. There's usually no coherent artistic vision.
It basically violates the whole idea of an album as an artistic statement, a cohesive piece of work from start to finish.
Exactly. And secondly, the track lists almost always suffer. I mean, if you're spanning 6 or 7 years of material, you've got different producers, different mastering, different production styles.
It all gets mashed together.
Yeah, The result is often this poorly blended track list that has no flow. It's jarring, you know. You leap from a huge 80s drum track to some mellow 90s ballad, and they always leave out key fan favorites because the choices are driven by chart numbers, not what the actual fans love.
Oh, and don't forget the financial insult, the thing that really makes the completist fans furious.
The famous, or maybe infamous, unethical tactic, we've all seen it. The record companies force the most devoted fans, the people who already own all the studio albums, to buy a full-priced compilation, sometimes for a premium, just because they tacked on one measly new song.
It feels like a shakedown. It's a cynical move purely designed to capitalize on a fan's desire to own everything by their favorite artist.
It is a shakedown. So given all that intense, well-reasoned skepticism, why did Roxette's compilation not just scrape through, but win? It must have been a critical exception to all those rules.
It had to be.
Well, Roxette managed to respect the fan base just enough to overcome those, inherent weaknesses of the format. Greenstocks talks about his intense fandom in the mid-90s. He owned Look Sharp, Joyride, Tourism, Crash, Boom Bang.
All the big ones.
All of them. And he specifically said that his CD of Tourism was possibly the closest thing he owned to being worn out. That tells you something about the sustained listening.
And Roxette's approach to this 1995 compilation was it was different from that standard cash-in model.
Massively different. Instead of one new track, they gave you 4 genuinely new songs, plus Almost Unreal, which had only ever been on the soundtrack for that highly questionable Super Mario Bros. Movie.
Oh, that movie. Right. So that's 5 tracks that were either brand new or at least not on a standard studio album. That immediately deals with that core unethical complaint. It offered real value beyond just the hits.
It did. And yet, despite that value, the author admits he initially skipped it back in '95.
And why was that?
Well, it just speaks to the psychology of a fan with limited funds, right? If you're a student and you already own 70% of the material, even 5 new songs felt like a hard justification for a full-price album. The notes say he only ended up getting it a full decade later.
Wow.
But now, listening to it for the album quest, the detailed fan critique starts to sharpen around the track list, the organization of it.
Okay, so the sequencing. That's a minor point, but for someone grading this rigorously, it's a key point of contention.
The choice was to start with 2 of those new songs, which immediately disrupts the flow, and then the album flips into chronological order for the rest of the big hits.
I can see why that's annoying.
Yeah, the author argued that for a collection that's supposed to represent a legacy, it would have been so much better to start with The Look, their first US #1, and then just keep it chronological all the way through.
That makes perfect sense. Starting with the new songs feels like a marketing ploy, like, hey, we're trying to sell you something new. Starting with The Look says, welcome to the history of Roxette.
Exactly. It would have respected the historical narrative, but, despite these little structural quibbles, it was the undeniable quality of the music that secured the win.
Right.
Greenstocks describes the songs as saccharine and sweet, which kind of sounds like a negative, but then he immediately follows up by calling them superb pop tunes.
Because they've got enough of that rock and roll energy, that genuine passion, driven by Marie's vocals and Per Jessel's sharp songwriting. It lifts the music way beyond typical manufactured pop.
That blend is what elevates them. It took them to a level that really not many other 90s acts surpassed. They weren't just charting, they were delivering these high-energy, high-quality, memorable singles with real instruments.
Okay, let's get into the specifics of the track analysis, because the album quest demands this level of detail. We're talking single remixes and, crucially, omissions.
For sure. The collection is packed. Joyride, It Must Have Been Love, How Do You Do, Listen to Your Heart, Spending My Time. And the single remix versions, they're generally really well done, necessary for radio play.
Give me an example of a necessary adaptation.
Well, Joyride, for example. On the original album, it has that long opening with the sound effects, the ignition, the monologue. The single version here needed to be truncated to get right to the song. It fulfills the promise of the album's title.
Don't bore us, get to the chorus.
Exactly. And similarly, Crash, Boom Bang, and Vulnerable are both shorter here than on their original albums.
But there's a major surprising omission, one that clearly frustrated our listener and points to a flaw the compilation failed to fix.
This is the missing piece of the puzzle, Queen of Rain. Greenstocks argues that if any song needed a remixed single version, it was this one.
Why that one specifically?
Because on its original album, Tourism, the track awkwardly fades in. It blends with these distracting live concert sounds in its opening notes.
Oh, right. So the compilation was the perfect chance to finally deliver a clean, untarnished studio version of a great song. And they just missed it.
Completely missed it. A major sticking point. It detracts from its perfection, but it also tells you a lot about the level of detail being applied in this analysis.
Let's go back to those 5 new songs for a second.
Yeah.
Were they really hits? Or were they just filler to justify the price tag?
That's a fair question. Almost Unreal was a top 10 hit in the UK, so that one definitely counts. But the other 4 new ones. The author's research confirmed only June Afternoon charted in the UK, and only at a measly 52nd position.
So not exactly hit.
Not really. So, even the Roxette exception isn't perfect. The album wins despite these minor issues, the missing Queen of Rain, the weird sequencing, other songs he wishes were on there like Chances or Never Ending Love.
So why does it win?
It wins because the sheer density of superb, high-quality work from that 89 to 95 period is it's overwhelming. It's about 70 minutes long. It's immense value for money. It overcame the skepticism of the format through pure concentration of quality, amplified by that powerful emotional weight tied to Marie Fredrikson's voice. It just set the standard in this group for sustained, enjoyable listening.
A worthy, if intensely debated, number 1. Okay, let's move on to the album that grabbed the second and final advancing spot.
Securing that crucial number 2 spot is Boston Vinyl, the debut album. And what's really fascinating here is that its presence in the group wasn't just about the music itself. It was the perfect catalyst for a big hardware upgrade, which directly impacted its ranking.
This is where the album quest goes beyond music criticism and becomes like an exercise in audiophile dedication. Greenstocks notes that having a high-quality vinyl record in this group gave him the justification for a very specific purchase.
The gear upgrade was a Cambridge Audio Alvis Solo Phono preamp. And for anyone who isn't familiar, this is a vital piece of kit, specifically for playing vinyl. We have to understand why this matters so much.
Yeah, please explain the tech here, because this is where the score gets justified beyond just, oh, I like the music.
Okay, so when a record is mastered, the bass frequencies are deliberately turned down and the treble frequencies are boosted. That's because wide bass grooves take up a lot of physical space on the vinyl, which limits the playtime.
Right.
So to correct that deliberate distortion, you need a phono preamp to apply what's called the RIA equalization curve. This curve boosts the bass back up and cuts the treble back down to their intended flat response.
So if you just plugged a turntable straight into a normal stereo input, it would sound awful. Thin, weak, tinny.
The preamp is that mandatory first stage of amplification and equalization. Precisely. And this specific upgrade, the Alva Solo, was brought in to boost and clean that critical first signal from the turntable. And the author was emphatic. It was a great decision. The subjective improvement was immediate and tangible.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because he kind of takes on the confusing, sometimes nonsensical language that audio reviewers use.
Yeah.
But then he validates it through his own experience.
He does. He specifically calls out the utter nonsensical bullshit. You often read phrases like, an amp gives tighter control over the sound, producing a more dynamic feel.
They sound like marketing buzzwords, right? Divorced from reality.
Totally. But Greenstocks' experience was that he heard exactly that. He confirmed the new preamp achieved those results, making that vague terminology suddenly feel concrete.
So what changed specifically?
The soundstage, which is basically the spatial location and width of the instruments across your speakers, was enhanced. It really felt like the new gear was breathing new life into the vinyl. More detail was coming through, and the whole record just sounded less strained, especially during those complex instrumental parts, which is a hallmark of Boston's layered sound.
And we have a very specific example of this, focusing on the vocals on Peace of Mind.
Previously, the vocals on that track were described as shrieky at the top end, which is a common complaint with older, brighter rock mastering on budget systems. With the new preamp, they sounded richer, fuller, and less ephemeral.
Can we break down less ephemeral? What does that mean in a, non-jargon way?
Sure. Ephemeral, in sound, suggests something thin, fleeting, lacking substance. When vocals become less ephemeral, it means they gain body, weight, presence. They sound like they're solidly placed in the room with you, rather than just shimmering weakly at the high end. It's often a result of better control over high-frequency reproduction and less distortion at that crucial first amplification stage.
So the upgrade let him hear the album closer to its legendary potential, which boosted its score. But there's a flip side to more clarity, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. Enhanced clarity is a double-edged sword. It exposes the imperfections on the record itself far more vividly. The preamp can't fix physical flaws on the vinyl, it just brings them into starker relief.
And his copy of Boston had two distinct, annoying flaws that were now well highlighted.
Flaw number one was a very slight but frustrating clip on Peace of Mind, right before that sumptuous guitar solo from Schultz. And the annoyance is in the anticipation. The clip hits just before the first note of the solo, totally interrupting the buildup.
And flaw number two happens during that long keyboard interlude between foreplay and long time.
Yep. As that sound drops low and dark, there's a periodic clipping that lasts for about 5 or 6 rotations of the record. That heightened clarity means these little bits of damage or pressing defects become more prominent. They almost taunt you during what's otherwise a pristine experience.
Okay, I have to challenge this. If the album has two known, specific, and now enhanced flaws, why does it still score high enough to advance? Why tolerate that?
Because the sheer foundational quality of the music is just overwhelming, and the overall improvement in sound far outweighs those specific minor flaws. The listening experience as a whole was raised substantially, but the scoring also reflects the album's structural quality, which Greenstocks noted is pretty lopsided.
Let's talk about that lopsidedness. The consensus is that while it's a classic, it is uneven.
Yeah, the author noted that side 2 of his vinyl is in fairly pristine physical condition, probably because it got less play over the years, because side 1 is just undeniably superior in terms of the iconic material.
Side 1 is almost a perfect 1970s hard rock A-side. It opens with More Than a Feeling, which, that sets an impossibly high bar to follow.
An impossibly high bar. That track alone defines an era. But side 1 keeps that quality seriously high with Peace of Mind and Long Time right after it. It's a flawless trio of massive, massive hits. That concentration of iconic, genre-defining music in the first half is its huge competitive strength.
What about side 2? Does it just fall off a cliff? Or does it just fail to keep up that impossible pace?
It opens strong with Rock and Roll Band, which he calls an exceedingly catchy rock tune. It keeps the energy high. But the rest of the side, Smoke and Hitch a Ride, Something About You, and that schmaltzy final track, Let Me Take You Home Tonight, they're all fine, they're pleasant. But the material's a little less compelling, a bit more generic, compared to that genius run on side 1.
If we were to guess, why the quality dip? Was it just fatigue? Or the pressure of finishing a debut that Tom Schultz had been meticulously crafting for years?
It's highly probable that side 1 is the material Schultz had been perfecting for ages in his basement studio. That's the core of the Boston sound. Side 2 likely contains the tracks written under more deadline pressure, or material that, while strong, just didn't quite reach that same level of enduring brilliance. The album is a front-loaded masterpiece.
So what's the final verdict? Despite the lopsided quality and the minor vinyl defects, Boston easily grabs that second spot.
It remains a high-class foundational album. The sheer concentrated quality of side 1, combined with the fact that the hardware upgrade allowed Greenstocks to experience it with more technical detail and less auditory strain, just made it impossible to eliminate. It earned the number 2 slot. It moves on in the album quest.
Which brings us to third place. An album that, according to the critique, was really unlucky to be eliminated. Suzanne Vega's self-titled debut from 1985.
Genuinely unlucky. I mean, she came up against two absolute behemoths, the hit pack density of Roxette and the technically enhanced foundational rock of Boston.
Yeah, she was fighting the system. This album is all about focused, specific artistic mastery. But in a tournament based on concentrated impact, that kind of artistry often struggles against sheer volume.
For sure. And let's focus on the defining feature here. Vega's incredible ability to craft rich, expressive, lyrical imagery. This is an album you have to get lost inside.
It demands close attention.
It does. Vega uses this descriptive imagery to tell these incredibly rich personal stories, but she moves effortlessly between different kinds of narrative. Her real talent is taking these universal human themes, longing, observation, morality, and packaging them in these diverse allegorical frameworks.
Let's use the notes to get into specific examples to contrast the styles she uses.
Okay, take Marlene on the Wall. This is a modern, intimate, almost neighborhood observation. The lyric is specific, it's cinematic, a snapshot of contemporary life. grounded in the details of a room, a relationship, a single piece of art on a wall. It's highly relatable, very specific, and introspective.
And then she completely shifts gears with the Queen and the Soldier.
It's a stunning contrast. That's a formal medieval allegory. It's expansive, it's philosophical, it deals directly with themes of war, morality, the failure of communication between entrenched power, the Queen, and the brutal reality of the front line, the soldier.
And the ability to shift between that grounded, modern intimacy and this sweeping historical parable while keeping a cohesive, singular voice. It's extraordinary.
It is, and the musical style perfectly supports that storytelling. It's stripped back so the lyrics can be front and center, but the instrumentation is far from simple.
Right. The arrangements are subtle, built mainly on her excellent acoustic guitar playing. It's not just basic rhythm chords. The author specifically praised the little flicks and flurries of notes.
And those flicks and flurries, structurally, they act as these textural highlights, these little counter melodies. They introduce specific acoustic color and detail that stops the simple ornaments from ever feeling repetitive or barren. The guitar work adds depth and emotional resonance that anchors the story, but it never competes with her voice. It's minimalist, but incredibly rich and focused.
What other tracks stood out in this analysis?
Other standouts mentioned were Undertow, which has the sense of hidden emotional currents, straight lines, and the incredibly evocative Small Blue Thing. They all just demonstrate this unique, compelling voice arriving on the scene, a really high-quality, high-integrity debut.
So we have an album of serious, intense, specific artistry. It tells rich stories, features brilliant, subtle musicianship. Why, fundamentally, did it lose out to Roxette and Boston?
Ultimately, it fell short because of the competitive nature of this quest. It just couldn't compete with the dense volume of proven, ubiquitous hits on the Roxette compilation, nor could it match the sheer foundational rock impact and technical superiority of the Boston debut, especially when that debut was being played through better equipment.
It's a superb album in its focused artistry, but the quest demands the best, most sustained experience, and in this particular grouping, the concentration of hits won out.
A delightful album that just happened to be in the group of death for round one. A tough exit for a brilliant debut.
It really is. Okay, now we turn our attention to the album that clearly trailed the rest of the field.
Landing decisively in fourth place at the bottom of Group 218 is the Foo Fighters' 2017 album Concrete and Gold. And this is a result that needs a bit of analysis because, objectively, this is a modern rock behemoth.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
modern rock royalty. Green Strokes noted the high-quality production, it sounds amazing, and strong musicianship. The material is solid, so why did it rank last?
The key failing, as noted in the analysis, is that it is not particularly memorable.
And that lack of memorability is devastating in a structured ranking system like the Album Quest. When you're forced to listen to these albums over and over back to back, if an album doesn't instantly stick with you, if it lacked the unique character, it just fades when you stack it against more iconic or more personally resonant works.
But I have to challenge that a little. I mean, the Foo Fighters are known for huge anthems. Didn't Concrete and Gold deliver any of that good stuff?
It did, yeah. The good stuff called out included the huge riff of Run, the driving energy of La-Di-Da, and the melodic lift of Arrows. Those are definite high points. But the overall assessment remained. There's genuinely nothing bad on this record, but it never reaches a truly transcendent level.
So it's not a failure of quality, but a failure of distinction. It's a typical Foo Fighters album, which comes with its own defining characteristics and, well, its limitations.
It's the sound of an incredibly successful band, comfortably executing their template. It's mainly hard rock, prone to getting a bit shouty at times, which is characteristic of their later work. But structurally, it follows a pattern. It has this dynamic flow, punctuated by these splashes of light acoustic spaces every 3 tracks or so.
And that structure of alternating between heavy rockers and brief acoustic breaks, is that cohesive, or does it start to feel formulaic?
In the context of a rigorous ranking, it begins to feel like a predictable formula. The acoustic spots are welcomed, they give your ears a break, but they don't necessarily advance the album's story or character in the way Suzanne Vega's lyrics do. It adheres strictly to the Foo Fighters sound, which means it rarely surprises you.
And this leads to it being described as a functional record, perfectly suited for a very specific, very common activity.
The ultimate damning with faint praise. It is the sort of album that you can enjoy while you're driving down the motorway.
Ouch.
It works incredibly well as high-quality background entertainment. The volume is consistent, the tempo is driving, the production is clear. It helps the driving experience, but it doesn't demand your full focused attention.
And if you contrast that functional use with the hyper-focused, critical listening needed for the Boston vinyl analysis, or that deep emotional connection to Roxette, it just stands no chance.
That's the conclusion of the matchup. When Concrete and Gold is matched directly against the emotional weight of Roxette, the groundbreaking technical legacy of Boston, and the intense lyrical character of Suzanne Vega, it simply melts away.
It might be solid, well-produced, perfectly enjoyable, but it failed to rise to the level of classic defining work or even intense personal resonance that you need to advance in the album quest. It secured a definitive fourth place.
So there we have it, our two advancing albums, Roxette and Boston, and two excellent but ultimately eliminated records, Suzanne Vega and the Foo Fighters. A really clear result driven by fascinating criteria that mix nostalgia, technical obsession, and pure hit density.
We've reached the end of the analysis for round 1, group 218 of the album quest. So let's review the final rankings one more time and just reflect on what drove these decisions.
What stands out to you about the dynamics of this group? The final ranking was number 1, Don't Bore Us, Get to the Chorus by Roxette.
Number 2, Boston Vinyl by Boston.
Number 3, Suzanne Vega by Suzanne Vega.
And number 4, Concrete and Gold by the Foo Fighters.
So the two advancing albums are confirmed. The controversial high-value compilation, which overcame its flaws through sheer density and emotion, and the classic rock debut that benefited from a meticulous hardware upgrade.
This group dynamic is so revealing for anyone thinking about their own ranking system. I mean, we saw a debut classic and a compilation, often the most criticized format, beat out a highly acclaimed, focused lyrical debut and a solid, modern, high-production rock album.
It suggests that density of proven hits and strong personal nostalgia can often outweigh the objective quality or artistic cohesion of a single studio album. The legacy and concentration of memorable tracks in those top two were just overwhelming competitive advantages.
Absolutely. The quest reveals this powerful tension, doesn't it? The inherent flaw of the greatest hits album, often criticized as a lazy cash-in, versus its undeniable ability to deliver superior, high-value, sustained listening enjoyment. Roxette provided 70 minutes of superb, proven pop. In a head-to-head competition for best experience, that density is a massive advantage.
If the goal of the album quest is to find the most consistently enjoyable, high-quality, sustained musical experience you can have on a single piece of media, then the compilation acts as an absolute cheat code.
It does. And it forces us to consider a fascinating, provocative thought for you, the listener. Does the sheer number of proven hits pulled from a multi-year career inherently give a compilation an unfair, maybe unbeatable advantage in an album quest-style ranking, even if the track list has imperfections, like Roxette's new songs leading the charge?
In other words, are we ranking the greatest single artistic statement or the greatest collection of sustained listening pleasure? And if you introduce technical criteria like the phono preamp for Boston, does optimizing the playback technology automatically bias the score toward high-quality vintage recordings over recent material? It certainly seems like it did in Group 218.
It's certainly something to mull over as Greenstocks continues on this complex journey to find the undisputed champion. The rules of engagement are clearly influenced by emotion, technical obsession, and just pure hit power.
Food for thought indeed. We'll see how Roxette and Boston fare in the next round of this incredible album quest. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the criteria, the sound, and the surprising results of Group 218.
Until next time.